Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing with Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 15, text number 6. The title of the chapter is The Yoga of the Supreme Person. न तद्भास्यते सूर्यो न शशाङ्क न पावकः यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Michael, can you please read the purport?
Sure, Gitaji. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna. There is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahmajyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavana. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahat Tattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vakunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavana. As long as the living entity is in the dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes the associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that external world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become attached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of the false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramam mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is paramam, full of 6 opulences. In the Upanishads, it is also confirmed that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine or moonshine, for the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means.
Thank you, Michael. Om Jnana Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this wonderful verse from chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person, Krishna is telling Arjuna that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So we welcome everyone to this chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita. As you all have heard, this chapter begins about Krishna talking about the banyan tree, the huge banyan tree. And this banyan tree actually is upside down, just like we see the reflection in the water if you're standing, say near a lake or a pond or something, we see our reflection in that water, it looks upside down. So he's saying that this material world is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So that is why it is looking upside down. So he says that if anyone who can understand this tree, that person will understand the Vedic literature. So in verses 1 through 5, Krishna, he describes this banyan tree, this huge banyan tree. Actually, when he's talking about this banyan tree, he's talking about this material world in which we are and making us understand that this material world is just a reflection of the spiritual world. And he also tells Arjuna that it is not possible to perceive this tree. Like he talks about the branches of the tree, the twigs, and how these are different planets and everything. So it is very complicated. Krishna says it's very difficult to perceive this tree. One cannot understand where is the beginning and where is the end, which means it's difficult to understand this material world. We cannot perceive how it started, when it started, and if and when it is going to end. But Krishna says if we have determination, then one must cut down this tree, not physically cut down this tree, but with the help of detachment, we should somehow or the other get detached from this material world and go to a place from where there is no coming back, right? Which means going to the spiritual world, which is our original home. In other words, he wants us to go back to him. Krishna wants us to come back to our original home. And then in verse number 5, just one verse before the verse we are taking today, number 6, Krishna says, who is qualified to go to the spiritual world? Now, just like coming to the US for us, like coming from India to come to the US, we need a valid passport and visa. We cannot just walk into the country, right? We have to qualify ourselves to get that stamp on our passport. So, similarly, for us to go to the spiritual world, we need to qualify ourselves. And verse number 5, Krishna gives the different requirements for that, for going back to the spiritual world. He says, anyone who is free from false prestige, that person should be free from illusion. Now, illusion is a very, you can say, like a generic word. What does that illusion mean? He's talking about illusion of two things. One is, excuse me, we think I am this body. That is an illusion. I am not this body. I am a spirit soul. This body is just like the outfit that we have on top of the body. Just like I have this on top of my body, it's a covering for the body. Similarly, this body is a covering for the soul. So the first illusion people generally have is I am this body. And the second illusion people generally have is I am never going to die. So that is illusion. So one should be free from that illusion. One should be free from false association. Krishna says one should be free from material lust. Now, lust, It could be for power, for money, for it could be any kind of lust. And then one should also be free from dualities. What kind of dualities? One should not be disturbed whether there is happiness or distress, there's success or failure, it's hot or cold. These dualities should not, disturb a person. And most importantly, a person should not be bewildered. Who is the one who is bewildered? Someone who doesn't know what is the purpose of life. Why am I here? Who am I? What am I supposed to do here? Where am I supposed to go from here? It's like, I pick up the car keys and I tell my husband I'm going. He says, "Where are you going?" I say, "I don't know. I'm just going to drive." That is called bewilderment. So, being having this rare human form of birth, we should inquire athato Brahma Jigyasa. We had to inquire who we really are. And Bhagavad Gita is teaching us right from chapter 2 onwards how we can follow the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, we can surrender to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita and qualify ourselves to go to a place which is called the spiritual world. Now, today's verse, number 6, is describing the spiritual world. What is it? What is that spiritual world? Krishna says that spiritual world of mine, it is not illumined by sun or moon or fire or electricity. No. And most importantly, he says, those who reach that spiritual world of mine, they do not come back. They do not return. That means there is no more birth, disease, old age, or death. There are no more sufferings. We have heard in Bhagavad Gita that there are 7 kinds of sufferings that people generally go through. This birth, disease, old age, death. Then there are 3 more different kinds of sufferings: Adhyatmika, Adidevika, Adibhautika. Adhyatmika, that means miseries or sufferings caused by the mind and body. Adidevika is sufferings caused by material nature. Adibhautika is sufferings caused by other living entities. So all these 7 kinds of sufferings are present in this material world. They are not present in the spiritual world. Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Brahma bhuvana loka punar avartino Arjuna. Mamopetya tu kantya punar janmana vidyate. He says that even if one reaches the highest material planet, which is Brahmaloka, the highest material planet, it's not a spiritual planet, it's material planet. He says even if you reach Brahmaloka, one has to come back into this material world. But Mamopetya, Krishna says, those who reach me, those who reach my spiritual planet, Punarjanmana vidyate. There is no more birth again into this material world. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that as long as we are in this dark material world, we will be illusioned and we will be conditioned. These 2 things. But if somehow or the other we cut down this perverted tree of the material world, which means detach ourselves from this material world, we will become liberated and then we will not come back into this material world. Now, one may say this probably is possible after death. No. Bhagavad Gita teaches us that we can be liberated even while in this body. It's a state of consciousness. It has nothing to do with giving up this body or nothing to do with this body. It's a state of consciousness. So we can cut down this material tree, perverted tree. What does that mean? It means that we can become detached, which means we can still be living in this material world, but not get affected by this material world. This, and he calls it dark material world. Why? Because there's a lot of ignorance. Now, one may say, I'm not ignorant. I have this big degree, or, I am so well qualified academically. That's fine. That's material knowledge. Here he's talking about spiritual knowledge. So that liberation will come only when we follow the instructions given in the Bhagavad Gita, when we follow the laws of the Supreme Lord. Just like when we follow the laws of the state, we are considered to be good citizens and there is no punishment. But the moment we break the law, we are liable for punishment. Similarly, the moment we break the laws of the Supreme Lord, we are liable for punishment. So now, what is that spiritual world that Krishna is talking about? Srila Prabhupada in his purport explains, and he says that that spiritual planet is called Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavana, and it's the topmost spiritual planet. And spiritual planets actually are called Vaikunthas. Kuntha means anxiety. Vaikuntha means no anxiety at all. And we have learned from the Vedas that this whole creation is divided into two parts. A quarter is material world and three quarter is the spiritual world. So he's talking about that spiritual world. He says there's no need for sun or moon or fire or electricity. Why? Because that shining effulgence from Krishna's body is sufficient to light up everything. There's no need. And as Prabhupada says, all planets are self luminous. But here in this material world, we have only one sun, which is self luminous, right? But as soon as the sun sets, we cannot see. We need artificial light, like we have these bulbs lit up or the tube light or whatever. We need artificial electric artificial light, which is the electricity, right? So but the spiritual planets, that effulgence that is coming from Krishna's body, that is called Brahmajyoti, right? And the main effulgence is actually coming from Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavana, which is the highest spiritual planet or the highest Vaikuntha planet. So for us to be able to go to that place where there is no darkness, there is only light, not artificial light, but real effulgent light that is coming from Krishna's body. Now, to go to that spiritual planet, we will have to somehow or the other liberate ourselves. You see, that is very, very important. And once we get there to that spiritual world, there is no more suffering. We will not be born, we will not be diseased, we won't become old, and we will not die. There's going to be permanent happiness and permanent peace of life. Everyone here in this material world is looking for happiness and peace, but they don't know where to find it. That is the problem. Some people think if I do this, I will be happy. If I go there, I'll be happy. Just like when you go to New York at the airport, you'll say, go to Hawaii. When you go to Hawaii, it says, go to New York. Why? Because we're not happy anywhere. We're trying all different things. Like we get all excited when it's vacation time. And of course, now since more than a year, it's been because of COVID, not much travel. But when we get excited about the vacation, oh, we're going to do this, that, and everything. And the moment, we reach there, we are all excited. And the moment it's time to come back home, you can see those faces, of kind of depressed faces. At the airport, if you notice, the difference between those who are taking a flight and those who have arrived. Those who have arrived are like, oh, back to the grind. Now we have to go back to the office, back to work, and back to that same old life, right? So we are looking for happiness and peace, but we don't know where to find it. So Prabhupada says that as long as we will stay in this material world, we will stay conditioned. We just need to get purified. We need to get liberated. We need to qualify ourselves. Only then we will go to that place which is Vaikuntha, which is permanent happiness and peace. Now in Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, Krishna gave us the peace formula, right? It's very simple. He says, Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwara Suridam Sarva Bhutanam Gnatva Mam Shantim Richati. Shanti means peace. He says the only way to receive peace is to understand Krishna, to understand who is He. He is a Bhoktaram. He is the enjoyer of everything. He is a Maha Ishvara. He is the Lord of all the planets, all the demigods, of everyone. He says, if one understands that I am the well wisher of all living entities, I am the best friend, then a person will become free from this entanglement in this material world. But then there is a process to follow, right? What is that process? In third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yagnarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tad artham karma kantya mukta sangha samachara. How do we become mukta, liberated? He says, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. So when we are working, Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna, don't fight, even though you are a warrior, don't fight. Just go to the Himalayas and meditate. Just don't worry. No. We must do our prescribed duty to our best ability. But the main thing is to understand yagnarthat karmano nyatra. We have to perform our work as a sacrifice. Excuse me, as a sacrifice, which means perform a karma. We work as per the rules and regulations given to us in the scriptures and not desire to enjoy the fruits of our activities. The moment we want to enjoy, we want to become the enjoyer, we start getting entangled in this material world. So it's important to understand, like Srila Prabhupada also tells us in the purport, that once we hear this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, a desire should develop, right? Just like in the second chapter, Krishna says that when the senses come in contact with sense object, there is attachment, right? So as soon as the senses, say the eyes see something, then the mind says, oh, the desire develops, I want it. And then the person gets attached to that sense object, and then when the desire is not fulfilled, then a person gets angry, the anger arises, and that anger leads to bewilderment of memory, intelligence is lost, and a person falls down in consciousness, right? So it is very important to understand that when we hear this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, a desire should develop, which means we make a plan. When we understand this Bhagavad Gita, what is Krishna talking about? He's talking about 5 subject matters. Who is God? Who are we? The spirit, soul, material nature, eternal time, and karma. He's talking about only these 5 subject matters in the whole Bhagavad Gita, 18 chapters, 700 verses. So here he's saying that when we have that desire, then we should make a plan. Just like I have a desire to start some business. To do that, I need to have a plan. What am I going to do? From where am I going to get the finances? What about the location? What about marketing? The whole plan has to be developed. Only then there's going to be success, right? So we need to make a plan based on Bhagavad Gita's instructions, how we can come out this cycle of birth and death. We've been going up and down, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. In this Brahmand, this whole creation, living entities are just taking one body after another. But there is Bhagavan Jeev, there is one fortunate soul who gets access to this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. And with the help of Bhagavad Gita, a seed of devotion is sown in the heart. You see, so when we hear Bhagavad Gita, we understand it. A desire should develop, and we should make a plan how to get detached from this perverted tree of this material world and come out and go to our original home. Give up this perverted reflection and go for the real thing. That is what Krishna wants us to do. Go to the spiritual world, which is our original home. But if we stay attached in materialism over here, then it'll be very difficult to cut down this tree. It'll be very difficult to get detached. We need to understand that this material world, Krishna says, Dukhalayam Ashashvatam. It is full of miseries and it is temporary. He's making it very, very clear. And also, we should understand that if it is temporary, today we may have money, tomorrow we may not. Today we may have a position, tomorrow we may not. Today we have some possessions, tomorrow we may not. Today we have some relationships, tomorrow we may not, right? Because it is temporary. It's explained very nicely with an analogy that, say, there is a stream of water, or maybe you call it a river. There we see that, twigs, two twigs, they are just floating, and then with the current, they come together, and then with the current, they again go their different ways. That is our life. Because of our past karma, we are born in a particular family, in a particular situation or country or whatever. That is, karma has brought us together, and when death strikes, it is going to separate us also. So, need to understand that this Bhagavad Gita knowledge is actually a golden opportunity for us. And the best part is that it is Bhagavad Gita as it is, which means there is no interpretation. What you're hearing from me is also not my concoction, my speculation, or my interpretation. No, it is as I heard it from my spiritual teacher, who heard it from his teacher. And this is how the whole disciplic succession, it goes all the way to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Krishna tells us in the chapter number 4 of Bhagavad Gita, which is Transcendental Knowledge. First of all, he says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam. He says, I gave this spiritual science. He doesn't say, I gave this religious book or this religious knowledge to sun god Vivaswan. No, he says this spiritual science, I gave it first to the sun god Vivaswan. And if we calculate the time frame, we will know. If we read chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita, first verse, and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the whole calculation. It comes to 120 million years ago. And this Bhagavad Gita that we are reading now was re-spoken 5,000 years ago on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It was re-spoken. Why? Because Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajasya vidu sakalena hamata yogo nashtaha parantapa. Nashta means destroyed. He said this knowledge should be received in parampara, in strict disciplic succession, like it comes down. Krishna gave it to Brahma, Brahma gave it to Narada, Narada gave it to Vyasadeva. So like this knowledge is coming down. And this is how Krishna says, because there was destruction, destroyed, then I am re-speaking this Bhagavad Gita for our benefit. So it's very important that if we want to somehow or the other become self-realized, understand who we really are, understand the purpose of life, the goal of life, then we should associate with like-minded people, those who are reading Bhagavad Gita, those who have understood Bhagavad Gita, teachers of Bhagavad Gita, who are coming down in strict disciplic succession. We should hear from them. What more do we want? Right? Why waste this human form of life, which is very, very rare? There are 8.4 million species of lives. And after going through the whole evolutionary cycle, now we have got this human form of life. And with this human form of life also comes philosophical intelligence. Animals cannot understand the Bhagavad Gita. It's only the human beings can understand, right? Why waste this human form of life? Because at death, all our achievements become zero. Our credit cards we cannot take with us to the next life. Our credit score we cannot take it with us in our next life. And guess what? We don't even know if next life is going to be of a human being. It could be based on, Krishna says, Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam Tyajatrante Kalevaram. Tam Tam Evati Kante Sadatad Bhava Bhavitaha. Whatever we are thinking at the time of death, to that state we will attain without fail. Krishna makes it very clear. There is no doubt. This is So the time of death is our final examination. So to prepare for that final examination, we need to prepare throughout our life. Otherwise, how are we going to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death, right? So it's at death, everything will become zero. We will not be able to take anything with us, whether it is our possessions, our family, our position, our wealth, nothing at all we will be able to take with us. There was, I forget his name, there was a Britisher who was on the Titanic. He was one of the Titanic survivors, and so somehow the other he managed to save himself, so he survived. And then as he started growing old, he was struck with a disease, and the disease was such, it affected his nervous system, and so he had no control over his body. So his head would be shaking, his hands would be shaking, and anytime, his he would fall on this side or that side or anything. So there had to be someone always present to take care of him. And one day it so happened at the dinner table, there was a soup, a bowl of soup for dinner. And, he was waiting for someone to feed him. And whoever was taking care of him, I don't know who it was, just, looked on the other side to get something or whatever. And this Titanic survivor, he lost control of his body, and he went like this, like this, like this, and he went boom, his head fell, his face fell inside the soup bowl. And that person who was taking care took some time to come back. In the meantime, he died. Can you imagine? The Titanic survivor died in a bowl of soup. You see, it's at death, everything is finished, no matter what we, acquire, or whatever we get, name, fame, power, whatever it may be. At the time of death, it all becomes zero. You see, I was, when you, I don't know how many of you are on Facebook. When you go on Facebook, so many ads come up or so many stories come up or whatever. So today I was on Facebook trying to, post some nice pictures of Krishna, and, some verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And there it came up. It said, there were there was a picture of this gentleman. He said he quit smoking and he quit drinking, and he saved so much money that he was able to buy a car. And after he bought the car, he drove that car, met with an accident, and he died. And it said, so keep drinking. What's the point of giving up drinking when you are dying in a car accident? So keep drinking. Krishna says, na mam dushkriti no mudha. In 7th chapter, he says, na mam dushkriti no mudha. Foolish people do things like that. Foolish people do not want to understand the purpose of life. Foolish people do not want to surrender to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. He talks about 4 kinds of people who do not surrender to Krishna. And one of them is not just foolish, grossly foolish, he says. That is what he says. So, when we associate with devotees, with spiritually minded people, then a desire will develop to take on this spiritual knowledge, to learn how to detach ourselves from this material world. Because this material world, it has been, in fact, Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam says, andhakupam, this is considered like a deep dark well. And here Bhagavad Gita is giving us knowledge how to come out of this deep dark well. You see, we must learn how to detach ourselves from this material world. Now, it's important to understand that doesn't mean that we don't do anything in this material world. We still have to work. No one is going to pay our bills. We need to work to maintain the body and soul together. So we need to work, we need to have relationships, we need all that. But we need to understand that we need to purify our existence. We need to work for the Supreme Lord. We need to just change our consciousness. So, just like, getting detached doesn't mean that, okay, I'm using this laptop to, explain the Bhagavad Gita on this Zoom call. Doesn't mean that I don't use the laptop just because it's a material thing. No, I'm just using it for a good purpose so that we can somehow or the other use our philosophical intelligence and understand the whole purpose of this life, right? Need to purify our existence, just change the consciousness, surrender the fruits of our activities to the Supreme Lord. Anyway, everything belongs to Him. Nothing belongs to us. We came empty handed and we are going to go empty handed. Nothing belongs to us. So we must learn the art of performing service in such a way that has devotion in it while we are living in this material world. It's not that we should say, oh, this material world is temporary and full of misery, so I'm going to stop living. Nope. We still, but we learn the process of detaching ourselves. Now, to detach, we can only detach when we attach to something superior, right? Say, for instance, a child is eating mud. No matter how many times we tell the child, don't eat mud, don't eat mud, child is not going to listen until and unless we give something superior to the child to eat, which is maybe a rasagulla, gulab jamun or something. Then the child will say, ah, this is really sweet, and will immediately give up the mud. So Krishna wants us to engage in devotional service to Him, which is a superior engagement, which gives happiness, which gives peace of mind. So that is how we will be able to detach ourselves from this material world automatically. We will still be in this material world, we'll be still working, but our consciousness will be changed. So here Krishna is talking about his spiritual planet, which is Krishna Loka. He's talking about Vaikunthas, and he says that the spiritual world is Paramam. It is full of six opulences. It doesn't require fire, electricity, sun, or moon. It is illumined by the effulgence that is coming out from the body of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So we should somehow or the other take this seriously, take the study of Bhagavad Gita seriously and try and understand that, okay, I am here, but where have I come from? And why did I come here? And more importantly, why am I suffering? One may say, I'm not suffering. I have a beautiful body. I'm not talking about myself, I'm just saying in general. Person may say, I have a beautiful body, I have a lot of money, I have a nice house, I have a nice family, a good job, and I have a good bank balance. I'm happy. For how long? The beauty is not going to stay forever. Old age is going to come in. Job is never permanent. After a couple of years or whenever, we may lose it. Based on our past karma, we will only get X amount of happiness or X amount of whatever you may call, money or position or whatever it is. It's all based on karma. Every action has a reaction. So whatever we have sowed is going to reap now. Nothing new. If I'm going to sow lemon seeds, I'm not going to get mangoes. I cannot expect to get mangoes. I'm only going to get lemons. So it is all based on our activity. So Krishna says that this spiritual planet of mine, it is illuminated by his internal potency. And the only way to achieve that spiritual planet is somehow or the other if we surrender to the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. This is how we will be able to um, break this cycle of birth and death and go to a place which is full of happiness and peace. So I'm going to end here. If anyone